The solicitor's office smelled of old leather and older secrets. I remember that distinctly, the particular staleness of a room where men have signed away fortunes, confessed to lies, and arranged the disposition of their worldly goods before the grave claimed them. It was the smell of endings. I, Captain Arthur Hastings, had not expected to spend a grey November morning in the chambers of Whitfield, Drummond and Pierce, Lincoln's Inn Fields. Poirot and I had been on our way to a late breakfast, Poirot having declared that the tisane in our flat had gone stale and that only the continental breakfast at Claridge's would revive him, when the message arrived by hand. The boy who delivered it could not have been older than 12. He thrust the envelope at Poirot with the urgency of someone who has been told to run and not stop, then vanished into the fog before either of us could ask a question. The note inside was brief. 3 lines, written in a hand I did not recognize. Monsieur Poirot, I am dead by the time you read this. The letter in Mr. Drummond's keeping will explain. Come at once. Trust no one in my family. Marcus Dunhill. Poirot read it twice, turned it over, held the paper to his nose, and then said, with a quietness that chilled me more than any exclamation could have, "We go." I had heard of Marcus Dunhill. Most of London had. He was the eldest son of the late Sir Reginald Dunhill, whose shipping fortune had built half the warehouses along the Thames. Marcus himself was a barrister. Brilliant, I was told, but troubled. The society pages whispered of debts and quarrels, and there had been rumours, 6 months prior, of a broken engagement that had caused considerable scandal. What I did not know, as our taxi rattled through the fog toward Lincoln's Inn, was that Marcus Dunhill had been found dead in his Kensington flat that very morning. His cleaning woman had discovered the body at 7:30. The police had been called. A doctor had examined him. The verdict at that early hour was suicide. We arrived at the solicitor's chambers to find a man in considerable distress. Mr. Drummond was perhaps 55, portly, perspiring, his silver hair disordered as though he had been running his hands through it repeatedly. Monsieur Poirot. He rose from behind his desk with the relief of a man greeting a lifeboat. Thank heaven, you received the message. The message from a dead man. Yes. Drummond flinched. Then you know. About Marcus. I know only what his note tells me. That he anticipated his own death, that he entrusted you with a letter, and that he wished me to receive it. The rest, Monsieur Drummond, you will now explain. The solicitor sank back into his chair. He opened a drawer and produced a large envelope, sealed with red wax. The impression in the wax was a signet ring, a ship beneath a star, the Dunhill family crest. Marcus came to me 10 days ago, Drummond began. He was agitated, more than I had ever seen him. He said he had written 2 letters. The first was for you, to be delivered on the morning of his death. The second, he tapped the sealed envelope, was to be placed in my keeping and given to you personally. He made me swear, Monsieur Poirot. He was specific, only to you, not the police, not his family. You. He said nothing of why, only that he expected to die. He said it calmly, almost resigned. I tried to press him. I asked if he was ill, if he was in danger. He smiled. A terrible smile, Monsieur Poirot, the kind one sees on the face of a man who has already accepted something unbearable, and said, I know too much, Drummond, and the person who silenced my father will silence me. The room went very quiet. His father, Poirot said softly. Sir Reginald Dunhill, who died 8 months ago, heart failure, according to the death certificate. But Marcus never believed it. He told me he had been conducting his own investigation. He said he had found proof that his father was murdered. Poirot reached across the desk and took the sealed envelope. He turned it slowly in his hands, studying the wax, the paper, the weight of it. And now Marcus himself is dead. Suicide, the police say. They found him in his study, in his armchair, with an empty glass beside him. Whiskey laced with barbiturates, they think. No sign of forced entry, no struggle. His housekeeper said he'd been calm the previous evening, had dinner alone, read for a while, then retired. A man who anticipates his murder does not commit suicide, Monsieur Drummond. He fights, he flees. He does not sit quietly in his armchair and drink poison. That is precisely what I thought, which is why I sent for you. Poirot broke the seal. Inside were 9 pages, covered in a small, precise hand, the handwriting of a barrister accustomed to building arguments, brick by careful brick. Poirot read the first page, his expression unmoving, then the second. By the third, his mustache had begun to quiver. He looked up. "Hastings, cancel Claridge's. We have work to do." Marcus Dunhill's letter was not a confession, nor a cry for help. It was a prosecution, a meticulous, devastating prosecution of his own family, written with the cold precision of a man who knew he might not live to deliver the closing argument. Poirot read it aloud to me in the taxi. I reproduced the essential portions here, with only minor omissions for the sake of narrative clarity. Monsieur Poirot, if you are reading this, then I am dead, and I was right about everything. 8 months ago, my father, Sir Reginald Dunhill, died at our family home, 14 Eaton Terrace, Belgravia. He was 71. The cause was given as heart failure. Dr. Aubrey Fellows, our family physician for 20 years, signed the death certificate without hesitation. The funeral was respectful, well-attended, and entirely conventional. My stepmother wept. My half-sister arranged the flowers. My father's business partner delivered the eulogy. And I stood at the graveside knowing, with a certainty I could not then prove, that my father had been murdered. The evidence came to me gradually, in fragments over the months that followed. I shall present it in order. First, my father's health. He was a vigorous man. His heart was strong. Dr. Fellows himself had pronounced him fit as a man half his age, at his annual examination just 3 months before his death. There was no history of cardiac weakness in the family. The sudden failure was, medically speaking, inexplicable. Second, his behavior in the weeks preceding his death. My father was agitated. He changed his will twice in a single month. He dismissed his valet of 15 years without explanation. He made an appointment to see me, an unusual step as our relationship had been strained, but died the night before we were to meet. Third, and most damning, the tonic. My father took a herbal tonic every evening, a preparation of gentian and quinine, mixed by the local apothecary and administered by his wife, my stepmother, Isabel. In the week before his death, he complained repeatedly that the tonic tasted different. "Bitter," he told the housekeeper, Mrs. Cathcart. "More bitter than usual." He asked Isabel about it. She said the apothecary had changed the formula. He had not. I checked. I believe the tonic was adulterated with a substance that, administered in small doses over several days, produced symptoms indistinguishable from heart failure. I believe this substance was digitalis, foxglove extract, which in sufficient concentration causes cardiac arrest. And I believe it was administered by someone in the household who had both the means and the motive to kill my father. I have narrowed the field to 4 people. One of them killed him. One of them, I believe, will kill me. The letter continued for several more pages, detailing Marcus's investigation and the evidence against each suspect. But the taxi had reached Eaton Terrace, and Poirot folded the letter away with the careful deliberation of a man preserving a weapon. Number 14 was a handsome Georgian terrace house, its white stucco facade impeccable, its black railings gleaming. The kind of house that announces, without vulgarity, that its occupants are persons of means and standing. A house where appearances matter. We were admitted by Mrs. Cathcart, the housekeeper. a stout, capable woman of 60, whose face told me she had been crying recently but had no intention of doing so again. She showed us to a morning room on the first floor, where the family had assembled with the stunned, dislocated air of people for whom catastrophe has become a recurring event. 4 faces turned toward us as we entered. I studied each one, conscious that I was looking at a dead man's list of suspects. Lady Isabel Dunhill, Sir Reginald's second wife, sat in a wing-back chair by the fire. She was 48, 23 years younger than her late husband, and still handsome, with the preserved beauty of a woman who had taken care of her appearance as a professional obligation. Her mourning dress was new. Her pearls were excellent. Her composure was immaculate. Only her eyes, red-rimmed and restless, betrayed the strain. Beside her stood Cecily Dunhill, Sir Reginald's daughter by his first marriage, Marcus's half-sister. She was 26, fair-haired, slight, with an expression of barely contained fury that seemed directed not at us, not at the circumstances, but at some private injustice only she could see. In the corner, half hidden by the curtains, was a man I recognized from the newspapers. Lawrence Hartwell, Sir Reginald's business partner of 30 years, co-director of Dunhill and Hartwell Shipping. He was 60, lean, weather-beaten, with a kind of face that had been hardened by decades of negotiation and salt air. He did not rise when we entered, and finally, seated apart from the others with the professional detachment of his kind, was Dr. Aubrey Fellows, the physician who had certified Sir Reginald's death. He was a well-groomed man of 50, silver-templed, with the reassuring manner that successful doctors cultivate like orchids. "Monsieur Poirot," Lady Isabel said, her voice steady but thin, like a wire pulled taut. "I'm told my stepson sent for you. Before this morning." "He did, madame. May I ask why?" Poirot settled himself into a chair uninvited, with that particular authority he possessed of making any room feel like his own. Because he believed his father was murdered, and because he feared he would be next. The silence was extraordinary, not the silence of surprise. Several faces showed no surprise at all. But the silence of a thing finally spoken aloud that everyone had been thinking, and no one had dared to say. Cecily was the first to react. "He told you that?" "He wrote it, in considerable detail. I have the letter." Lawrence Hartwell stepped forward from his curtain. "That letter should be given to the police." "In due course, monsieur. But Marcus Dunhill entrusted it specifically to Hercule Poirot, and Hercule Poirot will honor that trust." "This is a police matter. It is a murder matter, Monsieur Hartwell. Possibly a double murder, and if you will forgive me, the police have already concluded that Marcus Dunhill took his own life." "They are satisfied." "I am not." Dr. Fellows cleared his throat. "Monsieur Poirot, I examined Sir Reginald myself. His death was entirely consistent with cardiac arrest. There was nothing to suggest foul play. Digitalis poisoning, doctor, produces symptoms indistinguishable from heart failure. I believe you know this." Fellows' face went very still. "That is a theoretical possibility, of course, but without toxicological evidence, without an autopsy. There was no autopsy, was there, doctor?" "Sir Reginald's family did not request one. The cause of death was clear. The cause of death was convenient." Poirot's voice was gentle, almost kind, and all the more devastating for it. "A wealthy man dies. His doctor certifies it as natural. No questions are asked. No tests are conducted. The body is buried. 8 months later, his son, the one person who refused to accept the verdict, is found dead in his armchair. Again, the appearance is suicide. Again, the case is closed before it has properly begun." He looked around the room. "I do not believe in such convenient deaths, and neither did Marcus Dunhill." Marcus's letter named 4 suspects. Poirot shared their identities with me that evening, in the privacy of our flat, where the gas fire hissed and the London fog pressed against the windows like something alive. "Suspect the first," he said, consulting the letter. Lady Isabel Dunhill, the second wife. Marcus writes that his father's marriage to Isabel was, by the end, deeply unhappy. Sir Reginald had discovered, 6 months before his death, that Isabel had been conducting an affair. The identity of the lover is not specified, but Marcus hints that it was someone close to the family. Good Lord. Under the terms of Sir Reginald's original will, Isabel stood to inherit the house, a substantial income, and the bulk of the personal estate. However, Sir Reginald changed his will in the weeks before his death. Changed it twice, as Marcus notes. The final version, according to Valentine Marsh. He paused. No, that was the other case. According to the family solicitor, the final version significantly reduced Isabel's inheritance and redirected the majority of the estate to a charitable trust. So she had reason to kill him before the new will was signed. Except the new will was signed 3 weeks before his death. Isabel's reduced inheritance was already in effect. If she killed him, she gained nothing she would not have received in any case, and lost considerably more than she would have under the original terms. Then why is she a suspect? Because, mon ami, money is not the only motive for murder, and an unhappy marriage can produce motives that accountants cannot calculate. Suspect the second. Cecily Dunhill, Sir Reginald's daughter. Marcus writes that Cecily had a turbulent relationship with her father. She wished to study medicine, an ambition Sir Reginald considered inappropriate for a woman of her station. They quarrelled bitterly. Sir Reginald threatened to disinherit her entirely. Under the new will, she receives a modest annual income. Enough to live on, not enough to fund a medical education. Hardly a motive for murder. Under the old will, she received nothing at all. Sir Reginald added her to the new will, Marcus believes, as a gesture of reconciliation after their quarrel. So the new will actually improved Cecily's position. Why then is she a suspect? Because Marcus discovered that Cecily had been studying pharmacology, privately without her father's knowledge, at a London college. She possessed the knowledge to administer a poison undetected. Knowledge is not guilt. No, but it is opportunity in another form. Suspect the third. Lawrence Hartwell, Sir Reginald's business partner. Marcus discovered, in the course of his investigation, that Dunhill and Hartwell Shipping was in serious financial difficulty. Several investments had failed. Debts were mounting. And Hartwell, who had sole signing authority on the company accounts during Sir Reginald's frequent absences, had been making withdrawals that Marcus could not reconcile with legitimate business expenses. Embezzlement? Possibly. Or possibly emergency measures taken by a desperate man trying to keep a sinking ship afloat. In either case, Sir Reginald's death removed the one person who would have discovered the irregularities, and Hartwell, as surviving partner, gained full control of the company. And the fourth? Poirot was quiet for a moment. The fourth suspect, Hastings, is the one that troubled Marcus most, because the fourth suspect is Dr. Aubrey Fellows. The doctor. The doctor who treated Sir Reginald for 20 years, who signed the death certificate, who did not request an autopsy, and who, Marcus discovered, had a connection to Lady Isabel that goes beyond the professional. The affair. Fellows was the lover. Marcus did not know for certain, but he found a receipt among his father's papers for a private detective, hired by Sir Reginald to follow his wife. The detective's report was missing, but the receipt was dated 4 months before Sir Reginald's death. Whatever the report revealed, it was sufficient to prompt the changes to the will. And if Fellows was the lover, then both he and Isabel had reason to want Sir Reginald out of the way. Precisely. A conspiracy between wife and doctor. It is the oldest story in the poisoner's handbook. The wife administers the tonic, the doctor certifies the death. Neither can betray the other without destroying themselves. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the November fog. But which of them killed Marcus? That, Poirot said, steepling his fingers, is the question that requires an answer, because Marcus's death changes everything. If Sir Reginald's murder was a crime of passion, a wife and her lover removing an obstacle, then Marcus's death is a crime of survival. He was killed because he knew the truth, and the manner of his killing tells us something crucial. What? It tells us that the murderer is not merely desperate, but clever. To stage a suicide convincingly requires nerve, planning, and a knowledge of pharmacology. Barbiturates in whiskey. It is simple, effective, and almost impossible to distinguish from a voluntary act. The same mind that used digitalis to mimic heart failure used barbiturates to mimic despair. Someone with medical knowledge. Someone with medical knowledge, access to drugs, and the cold intelligence to use them. There are not many people in the world with such a combination, Hastings, and there are even fewer in the drawing room at 14 Eaton Terrace. The following morning, Poirot and I returned to Eaton Terrace, but we did not go to the front door. Instead, Poirot directed our taxi to the service entrance at the rear, where the tradesmen called and the household staff came and went. "The family will tell us what they wish us to believe," he explained. "The servants will tell us what they have seen. There is a difference, Hastings, and it is in that difference that the truth lives." Mrs. Cathcart received us in the basement kitchen, a vast, warm room that smelled of bread and carbolic soap. She was guarded at first, uncertain whether loyalty to the family or loyalty to the truth should take precedence. Poirot, with his particular genius for putting people at ease, assured her that he sought only justice for Marcus, whom she had known since he was a boy. At that, her reserve crumbled. "He was a good lad, Mr. Marcus," she said, her voice catching. "Wild in his youth, yes. What young man isn't? But good at heart. When his father died, it near broke him. Not the grieving you'd expect, mind. It was more like fury. He was certain, from the very first day, that something wasn't right. 'Tell me about the tonic,' Poirot said. Mrs. Cathcart nodded. Sir Reginald's evening tonic. He'd taken it for years, gentian and quinine, mixed up by Mr. Frobisher at the apothecary on Sloane Street. Lady Isabel poured it for him every evening about 9:30. It was their ritual, you might say. She'd bring it to his study on a little silver tray with a glass of water to chase it. And in the weeks before his death, he complained about the taste, said it was different. I heard him say to Lady Isabel, "What's Frobisher put in this? Tastes like the devil's own medicine." She laughed and said he was imagining things. "Did anyone else handle the tonic?" Mrs. Cathcart hesitated. The bottle was kept in the medicine cabinet in Sir Reginald's dressing room. Lady Isabel had the key, but Dr. Fellows was in and out of that dressing room every week. He came to check on Sir Reginald, his blood pressure, his joints, that sort of thing. He had access to everything. Was there anyone else? Another hesitation. Longer this time. Miss Cecily. She took an interest in the medicines. She'd ask Dr. Fellows questions about them, dosages and such. I thought it was because of her studies. She wanted to be a doctor, you know, though Sir Reginald wouldn't hear of it. But once I saw her in the dressing room, holding the tonic bottle up to the light, turning it this way and that. When was this? About a week before Sir Reginald died. Poirot absorbed this. And on the night of Sir Reginald's death, you were in the house? I was. I'd gone to bed early, about 9:30. I heard nothing unusual. Lady Isabel's maid woke me at 6 a.m. She said Sir Reginald hadn't rung for his tea, and when she'd gone to check, she'd found him gone. Mrs. Cathcart pressed her lips together. "Peaceful," she said, sitting in his chair in the study, head back, eyes closed, as if he'd fallen asleep. He was found in his study, not his bedroom. No, his study. He often sat up late, reading or going over papers. Lady Isabel said she'd left him there at 11 o'clock and gone to bed. And Dr. Fellows? He arrived within the hour. Lady Isabel telephoned him at once. He examined Sir Reginald, asked a few questions and signed the certificate. Heart failure, he said. Said he'd warned Sir Reginald about overwork. You said Dr. Fellows had pronounced Sir Reginald fit only 3 months earlier. Mrs. Cathcart's eyes were sharp. Yes, that's what I said to Marcus when he asked me the same question. A man who's fit as a fiddle in August doesn't drop dead of heart failure in November, not unless something changed. We left Mrs. Cathcart with Poirot's assurance that her testimony would be treated with the utmost discretion. In the taxi, he was thoughtful. The tonic, Hastings. It is the key. Digitalis, administered in gradually increasing doses through the tonic, would produce symptoms that escalated over days. Shortness of breath, irregular heartbeat, nausea. A patient already taking the tonic would attribute the worsening symptoms to the medication itself. And a doctor who was complicit or negligent would have every reason to dismiss the symptoms as a pre-existing condition. But we can't prove any of this without exhuming Sir Reginald. No, we cannot. And that, I think, is the next step. Obtaining permission for the exhumation required 2 days of delicate negotiation. Inspector Jameson of Scotland Yard, to whom Poirot presented Marcus's letter and Mrs. Cathcart's testimony, was sceptical but thorough. He read the letter twice, asked several pointed questions, and then made a telephone call. If Poirot says there's something here, there probably is, he muttered, not quite under his breath. The man's infuriating, but he's seldom wrong. The family's reaction to the news of the exhumation was violent and revealing. Lady Isabel received the information with a composure that bordered on the inhuman. If it will put an end to these whispers, she said, then I welcome it. Cecily, by contrast, was distraught. You're digging up my father, on the word of Marcus, who wasn't well, who was obsessed. Your brother was murdered, mademoiselle, Poirot said quietly. The police may call it suicide, but the evidence suggests otherwise, and if his suspicions about your father's death were correct, then we are dealing not with one tragedy, but with 2. Lawrence Hartwell protested on legal grounds. The family has rights, the estate has interests, but offered no substantive objection. His concern, I suspected, was less about the exhumation itself than about what a thorough investigation might uncover regarding the company's finances. Dr. Fellows was the most interesting. He did not protest. He did not object. He simply said, very calmly, if there was digitalis in Sir Reginald's system, an autopsy at this stage might still detect it. The compound is remarkably persistent in tissue. Poirot regarded him. You are very knowledgeable, Doctor. I am a physician. Knowledge of pharmacology is rather my profession. And it does not concern you that such an examination might raise questions about your original diagnosis? I made my diagnosis based on the evidence available to me at the time. If new evidence contradicts it, I will accept the findings. I have nothing to hide. He said this with the absolute certainty of a man who was either innocent or supremely confident in the thoroughness of his deception. I could not tell which. The exhumation took place on a Thursday morning at Highgate Cemetery, under grey skies and a fine, persistent rain that seemed designed by nature to make the proceedings as miserable as possible. I will spare the reader the details, which were grim. Sir Reginald's coffin was raised, transported to the mortuary at St. Bartholomew's Hospital, and there subjected to a comprehensive post-mortem examination by Dr. Bernard Spilsbury, the foremost pathologist in England, whose involvement alone signalled the seriousness with which the authorities now treated the case. The results came 3 days later. Digitalis, Spilsbury confirmed, in his dry, precise manner. Present in the liver, kidneys, and cardiac tissue at concentrations far exceeding any therapeutic dose. This man did not die of natural heart failure. He was poisoned. The word landed with the force of a gavel. Furthermore, Spilsbury continued, consulting his notes, the distribution pattern suggests chronic administration over a period of approximately 2 to 3 weeks, with a final lethal dose administered within 12 to 18 hours of death. The tonic, I said. Consistent with oral administration, yes. Digitalis has a profoundly bitter taste, but in a vehicle of gentian and quinine, substances that are themselves bitter, it could pass unnoticed until the concentration became dangerously high. Poirot turned to Inspector Jameson. Sir Reginald Dunhill was murdered. His son Marcus, who discovered the truth, was murdered to prevent exposure. We are looking for someone with medical knowledge, access to the tonic, and a motive powerful enough to justify the taking of 2 lives. Jameson nodded grimly. I'll bring them all in for questioning. No. Poirot raised a hand. Not yet. There is one more thing I must discover. One more piece of the puzzle that Marcus's letter points toward, but does not quite reveal. Give me 24 hours, Inspector. Then I will give you a murderer. The missing piece was the private detective's report, the one Sir Reginald had commissioned to follow his wife. Marcus had found the receipt, but not the report itself. Someone had removed it from Sir Reginald's papers, either before or after his death. Poirot spent the next morning in pursuit of this document with the tenacity of a terrier. He began at the detective agency, Barlow & Sons, a discreet firm in Soho, where a Mr. Barlow Sr., after some persuasion and the production of Inspector Jameson's card, confirmed that Sir Reginald had indeed engaged their services. Surveillance of Lady Dunhill, Barlow said, consulting a ledger with the practiced discretion of his trade. June through September, our man followed her for 12 weeks. And the report. Delivered to Sir Reginald personally at his office on the 14th of September. 1 copy. He paid in cash and asked us to destroy our files. We did. No copies were retained. Barlow smiled the thin smile of a man whose business depends on trust. We are professionals, Monsieur Poirot. When a client asks for discretion, we provide it. Then tell me, without violating your client's confidence, since your client is dead and his son has been murdered, what did your man discover? Barlow hesitated. Then, with the air of a man who has weighed duty against morality and found morality heavier. Lady Dunhill was conducting an affair. Our operative observed her meeting the same individual on 14 separate occasions over the 12-week period. Hotels, restaurants, a private flat in Marylebone. The meetings were regular, every Tuesday and Friday afternoon. And the identity of this individual, Dr. Aubrey Fellows. I cannot say I was surprised. The suspicion had been building since Marcus's letter, but hearing it confirmed, spoken aloud in the dusty office of a private detective, with the rain streaking the windows and the noise of Soho rising from below, gave the fact a weight and solidity that suspicion alone had lacked. Poirot thanked Barlow, and we departed. In the taxi, he was energized in a way I recognized. The particular electricity of a mind that has assembled the final pieces of a puzzle and is now arranging them into their inevitable pattern. So it was both of them, I said, Isabel and Fellows, together. She administered the digitalis through the tonic. He certified the death as natural, just as Marcus suspected. Perhaps, Poirot said. Perhaps. What else could it be? Consider this, Hastings. If Isabel and Fellows conspired to kill Sir Reginald, then both of them are guilty. Both of them had motive. Freedom, money, each other. Both had means. She had access to the tonic. He had access to digitalis. The case is complete. Then why do you say perhaps? Because the case is too complete. It fits too neatly. And in my experience, Hastings, when a case fits too neatly, it means someone has arranged the pieces for you. I frowned. You think we're being manipulated? I think Marcus Dunhill was a brilliant man who spent 8 months investigating his father's murder. He identified 4 suspects. He gathered evidence against each of them. And yet, in his letter, that painstaking, meticulous letter, he does not name the killer. He died before he could. Did he, or did he choose not to? Because the truth he discovered was more complicated than he wished to believe? Poirot fell silent. We drove through the streets of London, the grey teeming in different streets, and I had the uncomfortable sensation of a man who has been looking at a painting from one angle and is suddenly told to step to the other side. Poirot asked to see Marcus Dunhill's flat. Inspector Jameson arranged access, and we went that afternoon. The flat was in a quiet, expensive building in Kensington, the kind of place where residents value privacy and porters remember nothing. Marcus's rooms were tasteful, orderly, and overwhelmingly sad. The study where he had been found was small and book-lined, with a leather armchair, a writing desk, and a window overlooking a communal garden where bare trees stood like mourners. The police had been thorough but conventional. They had taken the whiskey glass, the decanter, Marcus's diary, and his correspondence. What they had not taken, because they were not looking for it, was the thing Poirot found behind a row of law books on the highest shelf. It was a photograph album, old, leather-bound, with Sir Reginald's initials stamped in gold on the cover. Poirot opened it and turned the pages slowly. The photographs were family portraits spanning decades. Sir Reginald as a young man, dashing in his naval uniform. His first wife, Marguerite. Cecily's mother, beautiful, pale, dead of consumption at 32. Marcus as a boy, solemn-eyed, standing beside a Christmas tree. Cecily as a child, sitting in her father's lap. And then, tucked between two pages near the back, a loose photograph and a folded document. The photograph showed Dr. Aubrey Fellows as a much younger man, perhaps 30, standing outside a building I did not recognize. Beside him was a woman. She was not Lady Isabel. She was dark-haired, handsome, intense. On the back of the photograph, in Sir Reginald's handwriting, A.F. and M.D. Edinburgh, 1908. M.D. Marguerite Dunhill, Sir Reginald's first wife, Cecily's mother. Poirot stared at the photograph for a long time. Mon Dieu, he said softly. The folded document was a birth certificate. Cecily Anne Dunhill, born 12th March, 1909. Mother, Marguerite Dunhill, née Fontaine. Father, and here was the thunderbolt. The original entry had been scored through and replaced, but the ink of the original was still faintly visible beneath. Aubrey Fellows. Cecily, I breathed. She's not Sir Reginald's daughter. No, Hastings. She is the daughter of Aubrey Fellows and Marguerite Dunhill, conceived during the affair that the photograph records. Sir Reginald knew. He had known from the beginning. He accepted the child as his own, raised her, loved her. But he knew. And Fellows? Did he know? He has been the family physician for 20 years, Hastings. He has watched his own daughter grow up in another man's house. He has examined her when she was ill, attended her when she was well, and never once acknowledged the truth. Until now. Until Sir Reginald, in the last months of his life, began to change things. The new will, reducing Isabel's inheritance, adding Cecily's annual income. Sir Reginald was not cutting Cecily out. He was providing for her, even as he prepared to reveal the secret that would change her world. Reveal it to whom? To Cecily herself. I believe that was the purpose of the meeting Marcus was summoned to. The meeting that never took place because Sir Reginald died the night before. Sir Reginald intended to tell his children the truth about Cecily's parentage, about Fellows, about everything. And someone killed him to prevent it. Poirot nodded slowly. But who, Hastings? That is the question Marcus could not answer, because the answer broke his heart. We returned to Whitehaven Mansions that evening. Poirot did not speak during the taxi ride, which was unusual. His silence had a quality I'd come to recognize. The silence of a man approaching a truth he finds distasteful. It was nearly midnight when he finally spoke. Hastings, I must tell you what I believe happened. I ask only that you listen. Do not interrupt. Do not exclaim. Simply listen. I nodded. Sir Reginald Dunhill intended to reveal Cecily's true parentage. This would have destroyed several lives. Cecily herself would have learned that the father she adored was not her father. Fellows would have been exposed as both an adulterer and a liar. Lady Isabel's own affair with Fellows would have taken on a more grotesque dimension. She was sleeping with a man who had fathered her stepdaughter. And the reputation of the family, the company, everything Sir Reginald had built would have been consumed by scandal. So someone killed him to keep the secret? Yes, but the question is, who valued the secret most? He paused. Marcus believed it was Fellows and Isabel acting together. The affair, the access, the medical knowledge. It all pointed to them, and Marcus was almost right. Almost, but he missed one thing. What? He missed the person who had the most to lose. Not money, not reputation, something deeper. Who? Poirot looked at me with those sharp green eyes. Cecily. The next morning, Poirot asked Cecily Dunhill to tea at Whitehaven Mansions. She came alone, as he had requested, pale, composed, wearing a dark coat and no jewelry. She sat in the chair by the window and accepted a cup of tea with hands that did not tremble. There were no other witnesses. Inspector Jameson waited in the next room at Poirot's instruction. I sat in my usual place, notebook on my knee. Mademoiselle Dunhill, Poirot began, I've asked you here because I believe you are an honest person, and because I believe an honest person, when confronted with the truth, will not deny it. Cecily's eyes were steady. What truth? You know who your father is. A long silence. Outside, a pigeon murmured on the windowsill. The clock ticked its patient, indifferent tick. Yes, she said at last. Her voice did not break, but something behind it shifted. A wall giving way, silently, after years of pressure. I've known for 2 years. I found the birth certificate, the original before it was amended, in my mother's things after father. After Sir Reginald cleared out her belongings. He didn't realize it was there. And you said nothing. What was there to say? The man I'd called father my entire life had raised me, educated me, provided for me. The man who was my biological father sat across from me at dinner every Sunday and checked my pulse when I had a cold. What possible good could come from speaking? And yet Sir Reginald intended to speak. He planned to tell you and Marcus the truth. Cecily's composure flickered. Yes, I heard him arguing with Dr. Fellows about it. 2 weeks before he died. They were in the study. Fellows was begging him not to. He said it would destroy Cecily. Destroy me. Sir Reginald said it had gone on long enough, that I deserved the truth. And you disagreed. I didn't want it. Don't you understand? I didn't want some public reckoning, some ghastly family confrontation where everyone stares at you and you're supposed to, what? Forgive. Collapse. Thank them for the lies. I wanted things to stay as they were. So you took steps to ensure they would. The stillness that followed was the deepest I've ever experienced in a room. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of something enormous. The weight of a truth about to be spoken for the first time. I didn't mean to kill him, Cecily whispered. I want you to know that. I only wanted to make him ill. Ill enough that the meeting with Marcus would be postponed. Ill enough that the conversation would never happen. The digitalis. I'd been studying pharmacology. I knew the effects. Small doses would weaken his heart, cause symptoms that Fellows would interpret as natural decline. I thought I could control it. A few days of illness, the meeting cancelled, and then I'd stop. So he'd recover. Everything would go back to normal. But you could not control it. The dosage. I miscalculated. Or perhaps I calculated correctly and simply couldn't stop. Each evening I watched Isabel pour the tonic. Each evening I knew I should stop adding the drops. But the meeting was still scheduled. Sir Reginald was still determined. And I kept thinking, one more dose, one more day. just until he agrees to postpone." Her voice had dropped to barely a murmur. "He died on a Thursday night. The meeting with Marcus was supposed to be Friday morning. I lay in bed and heard the house go quiet, and told myself he was only sleeping, only resting, that the doctor would come and say it was a passing episode. And then at 6 o'clock the maid screamed, and I knew what I'd done." Poirot said nothing for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a gentleness that I found almost unbearable. "And Marcus." Cecily closed her eyes. A single tear tracked down her cheek, the first I had seen from her in all our dealings. Marcus wouldn't stop. He was brilliant, you know. Brilliant and relentless. He investigated for months. He found evidence, built a case, came closer and closer to the truth. I tried to deflect him. I pointed him toward Fellows and Isabel, toward Hartwell. For a while it worked, but then he found the photograph, the one of Fellows and my mother, and I saw it in his eyes. He understood. He confronted you the night before he died. He came to see me. He said he couldn't believe it, but he did. He said the evidence all led to me, the pharmacology studies, the access to the tonic, the timing. He said he was going to Poirot in the morning, that you would know what to do. And you went to his flat that night. I let myself in with the spare key he kept under the mat. He'd always been careless about that. He was already asleep. I dissolved the tablets in his whiskey, the same whiskey he always drank before bed. I wore gloves. I was careful. And then I left, and I walked home through the fog, and I felt nothing. Nothing at all. It wasn't until the next morning that it hit me. What I'd done. What I'd become. She opened her eyes. They were dry now. The single tear had exhausted whatever reservoir remained. I killed the man who raised me because he wanted to tell me who I really was, and I killed my brother because he discovered the truth. There is no punishment adequate for that, Monsieur Poirot. Whatever the law decides, I have already sentenced myself." Poirot rose. He walked to the window and stood there, his small figure silhouetted against the grey London light. I could not see his face. "Inspector," he said quietly. Jameson entered. Cecily stood. She extended her wrists with a composure that was, in its way, the most terrible thing I had ever witnessed. "Cecily Ann Dunhill," Jameson said, and his voice was not unkind. "I am arresting you for the murder of Sir Reginald Dunhill and Marcus Dunhill." She nodded once. Then she turned to Poirot. "He should never have tried to tell me," she said. "The secret was survivable. The truth was not." And she was led away. The case made the papers, of course. The Chronicle called it the Belgravia poisonings. The Mail preferred the daughter's deadly secret. The trial was brief. Cecily pleaded guilty to manslaughter for Sir Reginald. Her defense argued she had not intended a lethal dose, and guilty to murder for Marcus. The judge sentenced her to life imprisonment with a recommendation that mercy be considered. She accepted the verdict without visible emotion. The aftermath rippled outward through the surviving parties in ways that were, as Poirot had predicted, complex and human. Lady Isabel sold the house on Eaton Terrace and moved to the continent. She did not attend the trial. Whether her affair with Fellows continued, I do not know. She disappeared from London society with the thoroughness of someone who had been practicing invisibility for years. Dr. Fellows was struck off the medical register, not for complicity in the murder, of which there was no evidence, but for his failure to request an autopsy in circumstances that, the General Medical Council ruled, should have prompted one. He retired to a cottage in Devon. I'm told he tends a garden and sees no one. Lawrence Hartwell, whose financial irregularities were exposed during the investigation, made partial restitution to the company and retired. The shipping firm was absorbed by a larger competitor. The Dunhill name vanished from the waterfront within a year, and Marcus's letter, That careful, courageous, devastating document was entered into evidence and then sealed. I do not know where it rests now. In some archive, perhaps, gathering dust among the other relics of justice delayed and truth too late discovered. It was a week after the trial that I found Poirot in an unusual state. He was sitting in his chair, not reading, not arranging ornaments, not drinking tisane, simply sitting. His hands rested on his knees. His eyes were open but unfocused. "Poirot, are you all right?" He stirred as though returning from a great distance. "I've been thinking, Hastings, about secrets, about the damage they do." "The case is closed," Cecily confessed. "Yes, the case is closed. The courts have spoken. Justice, such as it is, has been served. But the question that will not leave me, the question that sits in the corner of my mind like a guest who refuses to depart, is this: was Sir Reginald right to insist on the truth?" I was taken aback. Of course he was. The truth is always right. Is it? He intended to tell Cecily that the man she called father was not her father, that the family physician, whom she had known all her life, was her biological parent, that her mother's marriage began with an infidelity, that her entire identity was built upon a lie. But the lie was doing damage. Fellows was, they were all living in this web of deception. And yet, within that web, Cecily was functional. She was pursuing her studies. She had a life. She had a father who loved her. Sir Reginald loved her genuinely, Hastings. That was never in doubt. The lie was not kind, but it was stable. The truth destroyed everything. You're not saying he deserved to die. No, never. But I am saying the truth is not always the gentle healer we imagine. Sometimes it is a blade, and the person who wields it must consider whether the wound it inflicts is one that the recipient can survive. He rose and went to the window. London lay below us, vast and grey and indifferent. Marcus understood this in the end. In his letter he named 4 suspects. He presented the evidence. But he did not name the killer, because the killer was his sister, and naming her would have been an act of truth that carried its own devastation. He chose, in the end, to leave the decision to Hercule Poirot, to let another hand wield the blade. Do you resent him for that? Resent him? No, I understand him. He was a man caught between justice and love, and he chose the only path that honored both. He ensured the truth would be found, but he did not force it. He trusted that the right mind would handle it with care. And did you? Handle it with care. Poirot's mustache curved in a smile that was sadder than any I'd seen. I did my best, mon ami. One can only ever do one's best. He turned from the window. Now, there is the matter of supper. Mrs. Pearson has promised boiled beef, which fills me with a dread more profound than any murderer has managed. Shall we escape to the Savoy? The Savoy it is. And we went out into the London evening, the fog thinning, the street lamps blooming one by one, the great city going about its business of living and dying and keeping its secrets. And for a little while, we did not speak of murder.